Hello and welcome back to Tracking Trends. Here we track trends in almost every field: politics, economy, business, technology, markets. Today's topic for Tracking Trends: the GST rate rationalization that has been dubbed as a game changer, a major step to revive demand and accelerate growth. Is it really a changer? Will it give the boost that the economy needs in terms of demand for goods and services? Or are there enough devils in the details that may wipe off a good chunk of our hopes? I have today Dhananjay Sinha. He will take us through. But before we go over to Dhananjay, I would request all of you to subscribe to our channel. You can watch our past episodes on various important topics in Tracking Trends. What we do here also gets published on basispointinsight.com. Dhananjay is also a columnist there. So please, you can also subscribe to basispointinsight.com if you want to follow what we write, what we talk about. Welcome back, Dhananjay, again.
Thank you,
Just
Rajesh.
give us, give our audience a sense of what actually happened yesterday at the GST Council meeting.
So essentially, this was a follow-up from the announcement that the Prime Minister made on 15th of August relating to the GST rationalization. It is dubbed as a major reform in the post-pandemic era. And I think after 2017, when the GST was launched, this is the first major restatement which basically intends to reduce the tax burden on households. The rationalization that has been expected or has been advocated has actually been implemented, and this comes through the GST Council meeting. And basically, what it does is to reduce the number of slabs, the 28% GST slabs, and the 14% GST slab has been subsumed into 5% and 18%. So there is a kind of a shift in the number of articles that are there in each slabs, effectively implying a sort of reduced incidence of indirect taxes on households. And there are certain sim goods or ultra luxury goods which attract about 40% tax rate. So essentially, what it does is to reduce the tax burden, indirect tax burden, on a wide set of audience of consumers all across the country. Earlier, the focus was more on income tax reduction and giving employment incentive scheme to manufacturing and corporates. And this is a direct measure to ease the pressure on the household. The intent is to improve the overall demand scenario.
Now let's go step by step. So first of all, what we have now, earlier we had effectively five rates.
Yes,
Now we have effectively four rates, in the sense
correct.
I'm counting zero also to be a rate. So
Right,
earlier we had 28%, 18%, 12%, 5%, and 0%. And there were, of course, two more rates which applied to jewelry and a couple other things.
right,
So let's keep that aside. But most of the goods were covered by five rates. Now,
right,
in place of these five rates, we are now going to have four rates. There will be a rate of 40%, there will be a rate of 18%, there will be a rate of 5%, and there will be a rate of 0%. So
right,
in a way, this is a welcome step, because
right,
the GST was, one of the criticism was it has got too many slabs. And
right,
ideally, at the end of the day, we should have one merit good tax and one demerit good tax. So maybe,
right,
what has been now targeted as sin good tax should stay. And eventually, We would also still like to say, in place of 18% and 5%, there should be one tax rate, and then there should be zero tax rate on certain kind of goods.
Correct.
And in that direction, I think this is a welcome step. This is a first step. Will
Correct.
it be a game changer as it has been built to be?
So I think the answer to that question is that I would say that rather than labeling it as a game changer or not, I think it can be considered as a eventual easing of tax burden on household. I think the problem with the household sector is a consistent stagnation in household income and wages, etc., across segments of population, across all types of work category. So I think that is an important thing in the context that life cost of living has been going up for several years, and there has been reduction in subsidy and increase in tax incidence in the household. I think that has been a major depressant on the overall aggregate demand. So I think what the rationalization does is to initiate some amount of easing of burden. Remember, the bigger issues is about employment, income generation, etc. This measure does not take care of that. What it does is to really create a certain space to revive demand at the broader level. And we also need to understand that over the last 6 to 7 years, government has been pushing a lot on infrastructure spending, supply side policies, etc. That has not created the enabling supply responses by way of private capex or employment generation and income generation. So I think the backdrop of burden is very high, and what this tax easing does is to somewhat neutralize, very partially neutralize those headwinds. And we have to remember that we also have the tariff, conflict that is happening with the US, and the US imposing about 50% tariff on Indian goods, and the fragmentation of global trade that happens. It will have a impact on Indian growth, especially small scale industry, SMA, and the employment scenario as well. So I think it is an aggravating context from global standpoint as well.
If we reduce some of the GST indirect taxes, it will bring down the prices of goods, and therefore consumers will find it affordable, and therefore they will buy more. Uh, on the other side, if we bring it down, it also reduces the burden on the household. That happens provided companies and manufacturers and producers, they pass through this entire reduction in duties to the consumers. So now I want to come back to you on that. The second question I have is that demand for goods is as much a function of prices of the goods and services as it is that of incomes at the disposal of the consumer. So we are in a situation where incomes are rising rather slowly, or in cases it may not be rising also. In many sectors, we are seeing there is a real income decline. So in such a scenario, do you think uh, the promise that has been made is going to work out? Mainly, one, will there be 100% pass through by manufacturers? Two, are the incomes rising enough to take advantage of this lowering of prices?
So I think to answer your first question, I think what we anticipate is that, or one should actually expect, is that eventually the indirect tax is something that is imposed that which is passed on to the consumer. So that's the underlying principle, and it's quite likely that the government will ensure that there is good amount of vigilance and all those things. The relevant measures are taken so that the pass through happens, and I would say that it might happen. I would, to a large extent. What I would anticipate is that, and as is the case in many episodes that we have seen in the past, it's quite likely as the demand improves, companies might actually come up with new products, new value-added products, effectively increasing the average price they sell to the consumer. So it's likely that as I mean, so the thing is, what will happen is that the bridge between the gap between the informal sector products and the formal sector products would narrow, and hence the erosion of market share that was happening for the formal sector, large brands to the local brands might actually come back. So it's likely that there will be increase in pricing power for the formal sector companies, and they might actually work towards introducing new products to increase the effective prices. So you can repackage product. Consumer good companies do that very often. You can have a different size or different branding. Those kind of stuff can be done, and effectively it would mean that there might be increase in prices, and the inflation, core inflation, might start to rise going forward. So that's quite a possibility. So I would say that initially you might, for the existing stocks, while there might be a that existing products, there might be a pass through, but over time it might translate into higher inflation. And especially in a scenario where the RBI has front loaded monetary easing quite a bit, so it's quite likely the next 3 to 6 month time you will see a momentum in inflation rising, and by that time the food inflation will also rise. So I think that is a context that we need to really look at. What was your second question?
Second question was that demand is also a function of incomes,
Yes,
and in this now that most corporates have announced their annual increments, and we have seen that they have been by and large very subdued. A
right.
company like Tata Consultancy Services, IT companies led income increments, annual increments. A company like Tata Consultancy Services, I believe, has given between 5 to 7% increment. So here, a lot of salaried income people are not seeing uh, great income hikes. Daily wage workers and a lot of
Casual
uh,
workers,
unorganized sector workers have literally not seen any hikes. In fact, there are
right.
surveys and studies which are pointing out that their real incomes have actually are
Come.
shrinking. So, in such
Yes.
a scenario of incomes either shrinking or stagnating, even if you reduce prices, would that help in boosting demand? That was my question.
So absolutely right, Rajesh. You have pointed, you hit the nail on the head. So essentially, there has been stagnancy in nominal wages across segments, or wages rising proportionately lesser than the increase in cost of living. As a result of that, we have seen falling household savings, financial savings, and households have been surviving on leverage consumption as well. So if you look at the performance of companies in the first quarter this year, we have seen that non-finance companies' sales growth has come down to roughly about 4.8% or less than 4%. And typically that happens when the demand scenario is very weak. And what companies do is to optimize their cost, be it operating cost or capital investment sector. And part of that also filters into a sort of rationalization of employment and allocation towards salary and wages. So this is for the formal sector. We have seen that the overall growth in the wages and salary on an average per worker has actually remained fairly flat in terms of real income. And this is also corroborated by the income tax data. If you look at the salaried income over the last 10 years has grown about 5 to 6%, somewhat aligned with the inflation number. So there is a structural issue even for the formal sector. With respect to casual laborers and self-employed, that pressure is very much there, and we are seeing in the average real wages of agriculture sector workers, it is actually being flat or negative for the last 3 4 years. So essentially, when you put into context the GST reduction, what it does is to sort of ease that pressure to some extent. The cost of living might sort of reduce by, let's say, 4 5% on average. But does it translate into a sort of a significant multiplier effect? We are not too sure, especially in the context where there are other headwinds that would be evolving with respect to global trade tarification, and also the fact that the formal sector might be rationalizing their overall costs. So how the speed of demand revival through GST cuts, how fast does it pan out, will be very important to understand whether income generation are supportive for a sustainable demand recovery. So I think that's a very tricky bit. We know that notwithstanding the fact that over the last 7 8 years, government has actually given a lot of impetus to the corporate sector by way of income tax cut, large spending on infrastructure, etc. The private capex have been elusive. So I think we need to hope for the best. How it pans out and whether it will be effective in next, let's say, 12 months or months time and all, we'll have to see that, because beyond 12 months time you will have negative multiplier effect also seeping in by way of higher inflation and higher current account deficit as well. So I think I would say that hoping for significant revival, significant boom from the tax cut might be belied actually.
So, in the interim, or there could be some relief. So, some relief in the present, but there
Yes.
is no guarantee that future
Yes.
could be significantly better.
Yes. It's
So,
contingent on a lot of other things. Yes.
contingent on a lot of other things. Now, let's kind of for a moment let's consider that the intended results do come about. In which case, let's do a bit of a sectoral deep dive. Which
Right.
are the sectors you think are going to be the biggest beneficiaries?
So, as I said, it is like basic consumption items like food, milk, those kind of stuff. Consumer durables, low-end consumer durables, etc. Even I would say there is a focus on automobiles, two-wheelers. There has been a sort of rationalization from 28% to 18% for mid-sized cars, entry-level cars. There has been a sort of rationalization. I would say for SUVs and all, it remains at an elevated level. But definitely, there is a sort of rationalization out here. I would say there is a sort of some easing for insurance product. Insurance product, there has been some easing. I would say for EVs, electric vehicles, there has been some easing. So the non-conventional energy, there has been some benefit that has been given. So
Healthcare,
it's kind of a
healthcare.
wide range of healthcare, yeah, pharma, etc. So there is a whole list. I mean, it's very elaborate. It's a whole list of consumer goods and the things that sort of impact the common people. I think that is what the package or recommendation sort of captures. I would say, from in principle, it does try to address the burden of the common household and common man. So I think that's the in principle intent.
Yeah, so I mean, there is the list actually of essential goods and a lot of daily use consumer goods that would
Yeah.
see a reduction in taxes is actually fairly exhaustive. And if a pass through
Right.
does happen there, then it would definitely reduce the burden on the ordinary consumers. But I wanted to ask you, there have been past studies in the past on impact of indirect taxes,
Hmm.
particularly on industries that are facing margin pressure or are
Hmm.
operating on very thin profit
Fixed.
margins, which is actually the case with most consumer non-durables and essential goods producers. Today, they are, you take a Britannia, you take a consumer product company, for goods of mass consumption, they're all operating on very thin margins. And studies on indirect tax reductions in various countries have shown us that the chances of pass through kind of diminishes uh, if an industry is facing problems of margin pressure. So maybe
Hmm.
it will pass through 40%, 60%, and particularly when we don't have an anti-profiteering law anymore in place. So even if the government wants it may not be able to execute its intent that the companies pass through. So there is always a risk. What do you think about?
Correct. So I think, see, what we need to, I think, to interpret in a different way. See, what would happen is that the differential of prices between the informal sector or local brand versus the established brand would actually reduce. In a context where in the last 5 6 years there has been a premiumization story that has been building up amongst the consumer goods, where companies were focused more on price realization, increasing average prices, not worried too much about the volume growth. Companies made significant amount of profit expansion. A lot of formalization had happened as a result of that. There was pricing power, etc., and the margins were at a peak level. So if you look at consumer companies, auto companies, for instance, have been at a peak level of margin. So when the overall demand scenario weakens, income growth is not really growing, it's quite likely that consumers downtrade to local manufacturing, and as a result, the informal sector gains a certain amount of traction because of the price gap and price arbitrage. Now, what the GST reduction would do is to reduce that gap. As a result of that, the formal sector will win back some of the market share loss that they have made in the last, let's say, 1.5 2 years because of very high level of product prices. That will be they will be able to win back, which means that the informal sector would lose as a result of the reduction in the GST rate. So I would say, since the informal sector works on thin margins, and as you said, the effect of that on that segment in terms of employment, etc., would also have an impact, right? So I think that is how I would say I would interpret what your thesis is.
Mm. I mean, it's actually showing in the market today. All the FMCG companies, Britannia, Nestle, ITC, Dabur, all of them are sharply up,
Sure. Yeah.
reasonably up. But the biggest uptick has come in the sphere of automobiles.
Right.
So, so do you think, because in automobiles, it's the small cars that are going to get cheaper,
Yes. Yes.
tractors that are going to get
Yes.
cheaper,
Yes.
not the SUVs, which had now become the first choice for most middle class or upwardly mobile middle class.
Correct. Correct.
They will all continue to now. In fact, the tax burden goes up there to 40%.
Correct.
Do you
Correct.
think it's going to work? Do you think the small car segment is going to see a revival and the two
So I
wheelers?
think, yeah, so there is, I would say that two-wheelers are relatively better off because, I mean, you also have, it's a lower ticket item, and you also have EVs which are actually making an inroad. A lot of these two-wheeler companies have come up with EVs, which can grow very rapidly with the supply of electricity, etc., sort of improving. So I think there is a possibility out there. In the car segment, I would say the entry level cars might actually see about 8 to 10% reduction in the consumer price. There can be certain amount of improvement as far as volume growth is concerned. I don't think it will be a humongous amount of rebound, but definitely there is a possibility of some revival. Important thing to notice, if you look at last 12 years in terms of the composition of the passenger car sales, I would say 2012, the entry level car or mid-size cars constituted roughly about 65 to 70% of the total volume, and SUVs were roughly about 25 to 30%. That has actually reversed in the current context, especially over the last 5 years. So I would say because of the K-shaped recovery, you have a significant moderation as far as the entry level cars are concerned. I would say the current level of passenger car sales would be at least 20 to 25% lesser than it was in 2012. And the SUVs have been growing almost like 25% on a CAGR basis over the last 5 years or so. So what the strategy appears like is to really give a certain impetus to the lower end segment of the passenger uh, vehicles and automobile segment, whereas the K shape constituting the rich upper segment would carry the burden high taxes and maybe to some extent compensate for the tax losses that the government might incur because of the reduction in the GST rate.
Surprisingly, the auto index is up today. As of now, it's about up 1.6% in early trade. But the small car manufacturer, Maruti, is down surprisingly. Even in the
Oh.
two-wheeler segment, Bajaj and Hero Motocorp are down. So, is there something we are missing in the fine print that's
So
pulling
I
down this
would,
stock?
yeah. So the thing is that this news has been there since 15th of August. So I guess
So, it
a
was
lot
not
of
happening.
positioning, uh, market players have actually taken, factored that in. A lot of large investor may have taken positioning, and after they went, there might be some liquidation and some profit taking that might be happening. So typically
I mean,
happens after a
Mahindra
new day.
and Mahindra and Tata Motors are up. Mahindra is up very sharply. I mean, I think tractor is what is
Tractor, yes, yes.
is making it a difference.
So that I
Uh,
think has come as a news, whereas for passenger vehicles and two-wheelers, I think some of these news has been factored in already. Yeah.
now, let me ask you. So, what's the likely revenue that the government will have to forego because of these changes?
So I think there, I mean, we don't have a formal estimation. So I think when the initial announcement was made on 15th of August, there were estimates that the government would lose about 70 to 80,000 crores uh, annually, both for the state government and the central government. So that would have been a significant erosion versus monthly run rate of roughly about 2 lakh crores every month. So, I mean, roughly about little less than a month's GST collection would have been lost. So that is the kind of estimation that was there. I would say that there is uncertainty in terms of the estimate. There is going to be a certain amount of sort of I would say resistance at the state level because some states might actually get impacted more and possibly they have less tax revenue. So, especially the poorer state might actually contend this whole measure. But nevertheless, I would say there will be sort of counterbalancing other measures that is not seen in this package as of now. So I would say there will be more measures that the government will might take to counterbalance the tax losses because of the GST reduction.
So that then we might end up in a situation where what the left hand gives, the right hand takes, kind of situation. Because what I don't see in today's newspapers a lot, and even in the government announcement, maybe we'll have to look at uh, the details more closely.
Yes, yes,
As to everybody is telling us what's going to get cheaper. Not everything is being said about things that are going to become costlier. I mean, there are
yes,
some references. For instance, coal prices might inch up a bit,
yes,
even though the government has said that the cess has been done away with. But if one makes the calculation, coal prices may still get a little more expensive. Energy costs are expected to go up, which is why NTPC and all are down today. I'm assuming, and if energy
right.
costs go up, that kind of adds to input costs of manufacturing. That also adds to additional hardship on consumer. There may be more things like this which we might learn later on. So
Yes.
while you've got this nice list of things that really might make you feel good, but what are the chances that slowly you would keep hearing news that is there a situation that you also apprehend that what the left hand has given, the right hand is going to take?
So the thing is, the problem with the government is that the outstanding public debt has risen quite substantially, both for the state government and the central government. So the central government has a public debt of roughly about 200 lakh crores, and I would say state government roughly about 90 lakh crores. So totaling almost like 300 lakh crores of total public debt has been there, and this has doubled over the last 7 years, added about 120 lakh crores over the last 5 years. Now, relatively, I would say the economy, and this has been happening because of various stimulus the government has given, the COVID impact, also that there has been translation of private bad debt into public debt. All those things have happened. Tax cuts for corporates, etc., have happened, and a lot of infrastructure spending that the government did. All those have not translated into the private capex, etc. So I would say that. Now, if you have to reduce the tax burden, interest cost will continue to remain high because of the past debt or outstanding debt, which means the trade-off is going to be very intense at the back of their calculation. They might be actually looking at rationalizing a lot of stuff. So if you look at the GST proposal itself, has very high incidence of taxes on premium products and thin goods, etc. So that is clearly reflected even in this particular proposal. It is possible that I would say on the direct tax front there might be a certain amount of rationalization of exemptions, etc. The tax cuts that the corporate have done, there might be certain rationalization of incentives that might happen there. The other thing that one can look at is the large allocation that the government had made to infrastructure spending might actually start to get rationalized, and we have seen that over the last couple of years there is a slowdown as far as overall infrastructure outlay is concerned. So the government might actually do multiple things to counterbalance the tax laws while they try to address the household scenario. The gambit that the government might actually might be playing is that a reduction in the indirect taxes might stimulate a certain amount of demand, eventually translate into private capex and translate into a Laffer curve argument. So that's the bet, that's the gambit that the government might be playing. But I would say if you look at last 25, 30 years, I would say Chidambaram did experiment with this in 1997, and you had the Asian crisis in 1998. So the overall buoyancy in tax collection only started to happen after 2002. So it took several years, 5 years, for the buoyancy, cyclical buoyancy in tax collection to surface. I would say in the current context, you have a much bigger issue because you have a very long period of low private capex. So the potential growth is lesser. You have a global protectionism panning out of the last 12, 13 years, and it is intensifying with increasing tarification, and the flag bearers of liberal trade, global trade, have become extremely protectionist. So I think in a context where global trade is getting, economies are getting fragmented, the expectation that some of these initial rationalization of taxes can translate into tax buoyancy might actually be somewhat overstated. So I think it will take longer time. So the government will need to take more and more measures to resuscitate domestic demand, encourage domestic investments, and give more, I would say, delegate more freedom to state level and grassroots level to create employment opportunities and manufacturing opportunities at the grassroots level. So I think we need a much bigger reform at a central and state government level for things to sort of translate into a sustainable recovery path. So net, what I'm saying is that there are multiple structural limitations. I would say tax reduction is a welcome move. It is, I would say, it is just the beginning. Many more reforms will need to be adopted, and I would say governments will have to be far more imaginative on this front than we have seen over the last 30 years.
Hmm. So the government will have to be more imaginative than we have seen in the past decades. That's the need of the hour. So the changes that have been announced as far as GST goes, they're a welcome first step to doing many more things that are required to revive demand in a more sustained and equitable way, accelerate growth. For now, instead of cheering this as a game changer, we would do to be a little cautious, stay hopeful, but stay cautious, and show no complacency in getting into fields that require immediate redressal, just to ensure that every engine in the system starts working better. Thank you, Dhananjay, for your time. Thank you. Big thanks to our audience who have stayed on till now. If you have liked the show, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to basispointinsight.com, where you will get more insightful articles and videos on issues of interest to our economy. And keep coming back. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.